Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, Lisa Bowen, Chief People Officer at Full Course, the industry's first and only incubator and accelerator of early stage food brands, discusses the importance of retention within the restaurant industry and offers advice on how to improve it. She emphasizes the need for transparency in the hiring process and creating environments where employees love to work. Lisa also highlights the value of meeting employees where they are and understanding their needs and preferences. The conversation then discusses the role of AI in hiring and retention, noting that it can be a very valuable tool when used strategically. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
Great. Well, Lisa, thanks so much for being on the podcast. How's your day been?
It is a pleasure to be here, and my day is great so far. How about you?
That's good. It's good. Where are you calling in from in America?
So I live in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. I've lived all over the Southeast through my career. We moved around quite a bit, and we landed back home in the Cincinnati area about 5 years ago.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know you're doing really exciting things now, and I do want to dig into that. But you and I, before the camera started, we're just talking about my hometown or where I live now, which is Charleston, South Carolina. You have some restaurant experience here. Talk to us about that. Like, what were you doing here?
Well, I didn't live in Charleston. I actually lived in Atlanta, but I ran recruiting for a company that owns about 25 restaurants at the time called Center Archie, and they have the California Dreaming there in Charleston, as well as about 8 other brands that they have throughout the Southeast.
And did you find, were they all in what I lovingly would classify Charleston at times, a tourist town? Like, were they all in destination places or all over the country?
Well, they weren't all over the country, but they had restaurants in, well, Augusta, which obviously was very busy during the golf tournament, but they were busy otherwise as well. They have restaurants in Columbia and Atlanta, Greenville. I mean, just kind of all in that little area that's probably about 5 hours around Columbia or around Charleston. They had a corporate office there in Charleston for accounting and finance, but we all lived in Atlanta because that's where most of the restaurants were. Everything from high-end steakhouses to taco places. So it was a lot of different brands.
So when you were in that role, I mean, I can imagine it being challenging because you have the diversity of types of restaurant and the diversity of geography, where I'm assuming, I don't want to assume because you know what they say about that, but the staffing in Charleston is different than in Greenville, Columbia, and Augusta. So as somebody who oversaw kind of a very eclectic group of restaurants in different areas, like, what was some things you did? I mean, what was some of the advice that you gave to somebody that was in a similar position?
Well, I will tell you that I spent about 20 years in corporate restaurant recruiting. I started my career in operations, moved into recruiting, I always say, because I didn't ask enough questions when somebody asked me to be their recruiter, but I loved it. And I still do love recruiting. But in those times, I worked for very large companies like Applebee's. I worked for very small companies, like I would classify Center Archie or even Fifth Group Restaurants, which is high-end restaurants in Atlanta, a bunch of different concepts as well. So I've worked in a lot of different environments, and I think that really advice that I would probably give in any of those situations is to consider retention during your hiring process. So transparency in your hiring process, and that's with hours and pay and what the expectation of a good job looks like. I think if you train your hiring managers to have those real conversations with people during the hiring process, you're going to find that it's going to have an impact on your retention. And right now, in the current environment, I mean, think about it. We have less people in the industry today than we did pre-COVID. And I took some notes in a training that I went to about hiring over 20 years ago. And it said in my own handwriting, by the year 2010, there are not going to be enough people for the amount of jobs that we're going to have in the industry. And
Hmm.
so COVID only put a spotlight on an already existing staffing issue in our industry. So first of all, it's understanding who your target hire is, what your employee value proposition is, i.e., what differentiates you from anybody else along the strip where people are going to go and interview for jobs, and then to put a focus on retention through creating environments where people love to work. So that, all of this ties back to, what do you do when you hire people? How do you write your job descriptions? What makes you different than anybody else that they're going to interview with? And I think that we don't spend enough time on that. We don't spend enough time. We spend tons of time and money on our consumer value proposition, but we don't spend time and money on our employee value proposition. And I think that's a mistake. And at Full Course, where I work now, that's one of the first thing we do with the restaurants that we invest in is, let's talk about your employee value proposition. Why do people want to work for you?
Yeah.
And that answering that question is going to make recruiting and hiring and being staffed a lot easier than if you don't do those things.
Yeah, super interesting. A lot to dig in there. And, my mind instantly goes to the hiring funnel and where the
Mm-hmm.
bottom of the funnel truly
Mm-hmm.
is. Because I think, like, right now, if you go from application to interview to hire to 90-day to day 365, we have a
Right.
tendency in the industry to have that funnel optimized towards number of applicants, because people are so obsessed with, we need applicants, we need applicants, we need applicants. So all of time and energy kind of comes into, oh, we're going to optimize towards this number way to the left of their hiring motion. And then as I think people have matured or maybe more progressive, the funnel then becomes on, okay, it doesn't matter how many applicants we get. It actually only matters how many people we hire, because that's the key metric that we're looking for. And now what's curious in today's labor market, and I'm a big proponent of this, is the funnel should end at that retention mark, like you just mentioned, that 90-day mark where statistically, if people make it, they
Right.
stay longer. And all of the things that you do, your entire funnel should be geared towards day 90. So it
Right.
doesn't matter how many people come in, or it does, but matters less of how many people come in, how many people you hire. You should focus on optimizing towards, is this person going to stay towards day 90, and build everything according to that, to job description, to the way you reach out to people, to the benefits you present, the offer letter, what the onboarding experience looks like, and everything like that. Right?
I agree with you more. You're like singing from my sheet of music right now,
Love it.
because at the end of the day, I had a very robust conversation when I worked for a large home improvement retailer, and our team was charged with hiring a lot of salespeople for their at-home services group. It was
Right.
one of my favorite jobs I ever had. It was great. But the employment branding director and she said, well, my job is to get you applicants. I said, but I don't want applicants. I want qualified applicants. I want
Mhm.
qualified people. I said, because when you get me hundreds of applicants, my team has to look at them, and
Right.
that now this is, prior to being able to screen as well as we can screen today with AI and some other things that I think are absolutely fundamental to recruiting right now. But, at the end of the day, you're right. I want good people to talk to. I love interviewing people, but I really love interviewing good people, people that I'm going to hire. That's the goal. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities for us to meet people where they are. Look, the largest growing segment in the restaurant industry from the hourly standpoint is age 16 to 19. We
Mm.
know that. It's actually, interestingly enough, one of the highest growing management segments
Mhm.
in the industry right now, which, you wouldn't have heard of that, you know,
Yep.
pre-COVID. You wouldn't have heard of that.
Yep.
So really, you have to, I think it's the onus is on us to meet them where they are. And I think this generation of workers is brilliant. I love them. I think they're so smart. I think they're so connected. I really like them, but we don't often meet them where they are.
Right.
So, like grandpa's benefits, right? 401k is not going to, they're not even old enough to do it. I
Yep.
mean, what
Yeah.
is it that's going to appeal to somebody who's in the age group under 25? So they're on their chances are, and broad generalizations here. So
Right.
just bear with me on it, on their parents' insurance plan. So they don't really need insurance. They probably aren't interested in 401k because if they're out of high school, they're probably having to pay for college or pay back student loans. So
Correct.
they can't afford to do that. So what benefits can we offer that is going to be attractive to this generation of workers? And there are a lot of companies out there that are doing some really cool incentive stuff that
Yep.
you can offer, and the adoption rates are close to 100% on these things. you can
Yep.
you can use them to manifest the behaviors that you want, whether it's sales or showing up on time or whatever those things may be, and then they can go and get whatever they want with the points they earn. Those are the kind of things I think that other industries have been doing for a long time. I mean,
Yep.
rather than 401k, offer to pay out, do a match on a student loan payment.
Yep.
Right? There are companies
Yep.
out there that provide that service. And I know I've got a 20-year-old and a 24-year-old. That would be meaningful for both of them.
Yeah. What are some other interesting perks that you've heard that somebody who's listening may consider? So on my side, and in the hourly book, we outline a bunch from people paying for Spotify to getting free food to mental health resources that might not be covered by your parents' health insurance.
Yeah.
So like BetterHelp or something like that. What else have you seen be successful?
And I saw some of the things that you guys, I agree with what you have actually in the book. I think you make a lot of sense there. I think that there are ways that you can, and a lot of them are called incentive or rewards programs, but I would
Mm.
look at them as a benefit personally,
Mm.
where you can literally earn points or be granted points to pay for Netflix, to pay
Right.
for Uber Eats, to pay for Uber rides, to pay for, monthly massages, whatever it
Right.
is. And when
Right.
you give people choice, I think for the generation of workers, think about it, 70% of restaurant workers are under 35.
Yep.
Now, we could talk about it in a different in a different forum, but at pre-COVID, 25 to 34-year-olds left the industry and they didn't come back.
Right.
Managers, I'm talking about managers. So
Right.
there's a whole gap of management there in an age group that actually creates a bridge between the hourly employees and the older managers. And they're gone, 100,000 of them, and they're not
Right.
coming back because they
Yeah.
haven't come back yet. So I think that when you start to meet people where they are and say, okay, I'll give you an example. My boss, Lauren Fernandez, she was a chicken salad chick franchisee. At the time, she was the largest chicken salad chick franchisee, and she wanted to provide additional benefits for her team. So she went and got them health insurance, and nobody signed up, and it was very expensive. So she said the mistake that I realized I made is I didn't ask them. Do you
Right.
know what they really wanted? They wanted paid time off. My
Yeah.
son's a pastry chef. He when he was an hourly worker, he would have loved to have had paid time off, and he didn't. And what that ends up doing is it encourages people to go to work when they're sick. It
Right.
encourages people to, call off when they want to go to a concert,
Mhm.
right? So I think the best thing we can do as employers is ask,
Yep.
what benefit would be meaningful to you? Gamifying training, I think, is cool. There's some companies out there that do that. I think that meets this generation of workers where they're at. I think, surveys that were done of people that left the industry during COVID, and Yeah, never forget, we laid off 8 million people overnight. It
Right.
does leave a psychological scar, whether we want to admit that or not. But the people that left the industry that didn't come back gave reasons for it.
Mm,
One of it was flexible scheduling, and that's an easy fix. Paid time off benefits, right? Things that are going to help them have balance. They, let's face it, hostile work environments. It's
right.
out there. Leadership in our industry. 90% of restaurant managers started as an hourly employee. Do you know how many of them planned a career in the restaurant industry?
How much?
17%.
Wow.
17%. So there's not an education gap. Over half of restaurant managers have some college education.
Right.
It's an information gap. It's a leadership gap. And
Right.
that's the biggest thing I think we can do from a retention standpoint is have better leaders. Another thing that they mentioned was career pathing or opportunities for personal and professional development. That is not hard to do. There's so many resources out there that you can recommend for your employees. Those are the
And
kind of things I think people want.
yeah, yeah, and there's so much to digest there, but you said something that's just ringing in my head earlier in the conversation that I want to address or want to talk through. AI.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're somebody that's been in the industry for a long time. You've earned your stripes, and you've seen a lot of iterations of technology be introduced into hiring and retention and all these
Yep.
things. And I'll share a personal anecdote. So, as the CEO of an AI powered hiring tool, 5 years ago, I went to market and I remember standing at a SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management chapter meeting, talking about AI and kind of saying, hey, the future is this is how it's going to impact it. And just across the room, complete crickets, right? Like, I was the young kid with emerging technology talking about the future, and no one, and I felt like people still associated AI with the Terminator, right? Thinking that
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to come out with a Tommy gun and Skynet was going to take over the world, and there was a lot of skepticism, right? And
Right.
over the last couple of years, there just seems to be an accelerating path of acceptance of AI. And what I'm really curious of, just somebody who's been burned so many times by this, is, from your perspective, your journey for AI, did you have like admitted resistance in the beginning and you just like learned more? Has it been, we just have heard so much about it that it's like, all right, we're just going to accept the fact that it's going to completely transcend every single industry. Talk to me about like just your personal journey with AI where, now in today's like, time stamping today, you're like, AI can really help
Yeah.
us. A very positive
Eh,
mark. Talk to me about that.
So, to provide a little context, my first restaurant recruiting corporate job, I didn't have a cell phone. I had a pager.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
understand, I've been
Yeah.
doing this for a very, very long time. And I think originally, and we used the company I was with during COVID, we switched to a bot, right? They
Yeah.
screened people, that it was fast, it was easy application.
Yep.
And I have to admit that I had a healthy degree of skepticism, but understand that I have a healthy degree of skepticism about everything
Right.
because I'm very data driven.
Mm.
I make logical decisions. I'm not super emotional about those kind of things. And frankly, the company that we used, it was great, worked out really well, saved a lot of money,
Right.
but it, they didn't they didn't have enough data for me, so I had a healthy level of skepticism, but
Yep.
it turned out to be really great. As I've opened my mind a little more to AI and how it can be helpful, I think there are applications even outside what you can still use it in hiring, but there are applications outside, even with Chat GPT, right? If you go into Chat GPT and you say, I want to hire people with the following qualities,
Yeah.
right? What questions should I ask?
Yeah.
And it's going to print you an interview guide, which frankly, I will tell you, I've interviewed people and hired people at $10 an hour and $1 million a year. And I used an interview guide for every single interview I've ever done
Right.
because I don't want to have to think about what I'm going to ask next.
Right.
and I want to treat everybody essentially the same way. I want it to be fair and
Mhm.
equitable. So, but you can also use it when you say, I have somebody who's been late to work 3 times a week over the last 3 weeks. How can I have this conversation in the most productive and positive way? And
Right.
AI will give you something to practice, or at least give you an outline of how to move forward. Understanding your peak hours and your popular menu items. So, that, I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much that this technology can do for restaurant folks if they are open to doing it. Labor management. I mean, it's all the way across the board that we can use AI in order to help us run better operations.
As you talk with your peers and have these conversations, do you feel like you're in the majority of thinking AI can transform different aspects, or do you think you're in the minority as of July 2024?
I think that there's AI is kind of like a boogeyman right now. Like people
Right.
aren't sure. I
Right.
think that it's generational, frankly, AJ. I
Mm.
do. I think that a lot of my peers at my like age and
Yeah.
experience in the industry think that it's kind of it's not something that's going to make a day-to-day impact, whereas I think people that are your age are 100% behind it, and I'm
Right.
encouraging that because, and this is why what we talked about earlier with losing all the 25 to 34 year olds,
Yeah.
I'm worried about that
Right.
because when you talk about some of the younger folks, they have all the ideas and all of the ability to take risk and all of those things. And the older folks don't want to do any of that because they're resistant to change oftentimes. And again, broad generalizations. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah. Yeah.
individuals, but there's a bridge that's missing right now. In a lot,
That's
and go
super
into
interesting.
rooms. When you go into
Yeah.
rooms, just watch. We do a lot of corporate training for GMs. And when I go in, I'm like, everybody's either under 30 or they're over 50. What's happening right now? Why is this happening?
It's
Right.
yeah.
And
That's super interesting.
it's,
It's, yeah, it's super interesting because I didn't mean to cut you off, but
oh, it's okay.
um, um, like for I think for me, and granted, I am a tech person, of course,
Hmm.
but I think amongst my peers of people my age, again, gross overgeneralizations, is AI is just synonymous with software usage. So,
Yes,
like for me, it's when I turn on Waze, like, is it AI? Is it not? I just assume everything's AI now, right? Like it's just a new way that software is built, and especially with like the venture and technology climates, if you don't have AI, it's not competitive in any way with their peers.
exactly.
So for me, I've kind of always known that whenever I turn on Netflix, the reason why Netflix can curate the experience is just AI. The same thing with Facebook. Like, and the reason why I'm
Mhm.
seeing the content I like on Amazon and
Correct.
um, telling me when my car's gonna break down before it actually does is like my life in so many ways I don't think about day to day is being impacted by AI. And I think AI above anything just has a bad PR problem where at
Exactly.
that same SHRM meeting that I was at 5 years ago, and I'll just never forget it, is I asked people to raise their hands if they feel like they've ever used AI. And at the time, again, 5 years ago, maybe 5% of the people in the audience raised their hands. I said, okay, how many people use Google Maps to get here? And more people raised their hand. I said, how many people have checked Facebook today? And more people raised their hand. And they said, okay, how many people have ordered off of Wayfair today? And like the rest of the people raised their hand. How many people have shopped on the Target app or used Starbucks? It's like everyone's hands up. I'm like, guys, you're all using AI no matter what, right?
Right.
And I'm just curious of when the companies and I'll admit because of Sprockets, like we push the fact that we're AI out because that's getting
Hmm.
eyeballs right now. But I'm just curious as to when will technology providers just stop saying they're AI and just everyone just understand that like software now is just using machine learning and deep learning to make good product decisions,
Exactly. And I think that's a good point. I think that a lot of tech companies say they're AI, which probably gets, is really sexy to some people, but it's also kind of a turn off to others. And really, it's just a solution. It's a technology solution. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
And I think it may be a PR issue. If you told, typically, if you tell people I can help you solve a problem you don't even know you have, then they're going to go, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. I want to hear more about that. Right.
Right. Right.
So I don't think anybody has an aversion to solving problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that when you start to talk about yourself as a solution rather than an AI solution, it is what it is. You're right. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't go on Amazon without it recommending me 25 things to buy,
And
or
they're awesome.
Facebook,
And you want to
or
buy every
and they're
single
all
one
the
of
stuff I
them.
want, and I buy most of it, right? So, and I think that I don't think AI is going to replace people. What I
Mm,
do think is the people that strategically use AI in all of its formats, whether it's Chat GPT or whether it's, their
yeah.
inventory management system or whatever it may be, I think
Yep.
that those are the people who are going to be more successful. And really at the end of the day, when I say more successful, I'm thinking about retention.
Right.
That's like,
Yep.
this is the rock that I'm going to stand on and jump up and down on in this industry, because I got interviewed by a pretty big paper in Atlanta, by the economics guy, and he wanted to talk about staffing. And I was like, most economics people don't really want to talk to me because I'm a people person, right?
Right.
So he said, well, all restaurants are short staffed, and I want you to talk about that. And I said, yeah, I kind of knew that's what you're going to want to talk about. I said, but I don't want to talk about that. And he was
Mm,
like, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, not all restaurants are understaffed. 67% of restaurants say that they're understaffed. You want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is the 33% that are staffed. What are
mm,
they doing? Why are we not trying to help solve those problems and just continue to talk about the problem without talking about the environments that these folks are creating that helps them retain their best and brightest people?
yeah.
And those are the restaurants by and large that are more successful, have higher sales, lower costs, scaling, they're building new restaurants, all of the
Yeah.
things that happen when you retain your best people. And you might only retain them for the 4 years they're in college. That's okay. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean you shouldn't still give them opportunities to grow personally and professionally. That's what keeps them there. And
Right.
offering reasonable benefits. I mean, competitive pay is just table stakes at this point. If you're not doing
Yeah.
it, you're not going to get the best people. But there are other things that you can do that are much more innovative, that are going to keep great people in your business.
Right. Right. Well, I know that our time is coming up, and I feel like we're gonna have to do a part 3, part 4, part 5 of this, just given the conversation. But I ask every single person on the podcast the same question at the end. What was your favorite, or what was your first hourly job? And were you let go from that job, or did you leave on your own accord?
So my first hourly job, I was 13 years old. This is back, I guess, when that was legal. I don't know. But it was at the Purple Turtle Dairyette. No kidding. In my small town outside of Cincinnati. And I loved every minute of it. I loved when the baseball teams came in and I got to serve ice cream, and everybody, when you give people ice cream, they just smile. They just do,
Right.
right? And I thought, this is the best job anybody could ever have, because I'm making people smile, and I'm there when they win and I'm there when they lose. And that was pretty meaningful to me. And I worked there for, I think, 3 summers when I was a kid. And
Yep.
then I had to get like the job that paid a little bit more. But I still, until they closed, I was a Purple Turtle Dairyette customer. And if they were still there, I would continue to be. So it
Love
was
it.
my introduction, in me and, a third of Americans, right? First job at a
Right.
restaurant.
Love it. Love it. But no, thank you so much for being on the podcast. If somebody wants to get in touch with you or your business, what's the best way to do that?
Fullcourse.com, just like all one word. And I'd be happy to offer your listeners a month free to our training resources if you're interested in doing that. We
Perfect.
can certainly get that information to you, and we can get
Yeah,
people signed up if they want to learn.
we'll put it in the bio for the description. So we'll have our team reach out and get that done. But Lisa, love the conversation. Thanks so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.